I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023. A hot day here in Minnesota. They're saying the hottest day in years and years and years. So be safe wherever you are out here in Radio Land at KFAI for our listening audience here. And if you're listening on KFAI or listening on our live streams on either YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, we thank you for connecting. But we particularly want our radio listeners to join our subscriber pool. The way you do that, log on to YouTube Insight News MN and become a subscriber, and then tell everybody you know to subscribe as well. Today's program really points to the value of what we bring every week, every day actually, to this program. Today, I have the fortune of connecting with my colleagues who are stationed today in Bahia in Brazil. And we're meeting two people today that work in that community. And I'm promising it'll be a wonderful conversation connecting our people in the diaspora. But that connecting is important because whether you are part of the African diaspora or not, I'm speaking to my KFAI audience here, our story is important to us and it's important to you. And this is an invitation to be part of creating significant, meaningful connections in the building of a future in which we all value each other differently, appropriately, in ways that affirm our humanity and I think mean good things for life itself. So that's what we're doing. We promise that. We also want to thank and remind you on behalf of our friends over at the Department of Health that we are in partnership with them to remind our community that risk still exists around COVID-19. And the state has declared that the pandemic is over, so be it. But you also know that we've experienced an uptick in hospitalizations and infections being reported. So what does it mean? We need to continue to follow the COVID-19 protocols, simple things: wash your hands, stay aware, and prioritize prevention. Together, we can create awareness, we can encourage testing, and help everyone stay healthy. With that, enjoy this show. Remember, be well, be healthy, and just hang out with us for the rest of the hour here. Let me first begin by bringing in my two co-hosts, and we'll introduce our first guest, whose name is Renato Carneiro. He's the creative director and partner in Katuka Africanities, a publishing house in Bahia in Brazil. But let me first say greetings to you, Dr. Irma McClaurin, Insight News' culture and education editor, and to you, Maestre Yoji Senna, who is the leader of our Afrodescendentes project. Good afternoon.
Greetings from Bahia.
Good to see you. Good to see you as well. Well, I want to go straight into our first guest, and that is Brother Renato. And from publisher to publisher, so good to meet you. Thank you for being on the program. I'm just curious about what life is like for publishing in Brazil. Good afternoon, welcome. And may I call you Renato?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
All right.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sure. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to get here with you guys. I think will be a nice conversation.
Great. Tell us about your company, first of all. What do you do? What's the name of the company and what's the concept?
Okay, we started with the business 16 years ago. It's called Katuka. We have 3 different stores, Katuka Africanidades, Mercado Negro Katuka, we translate it like black market, Katuka, and Katuka Rio Vermelho, which is the youngest one, the most new store we have. And all the idea behind the business was to create a space of where we could share information, where we could share references related to our ancestry, right, with Black history that we all have. And so we thought that we could offer that in two different lines, through art, through fashion, and through literature. That's when we started. The business has changed within 16 years because the world has changed within 16 years.
Mhm.
But we always very committed to our political and social responsibilities. So we want to offer job opportunities to the Black community in the city. We live in Salvador, Bahia, which is the city with the major group of Black people out of Africa. We
Mhm.
are right now here 88% of the population.
Mhm.
And but
What's that number in terms of how many people would that be?
oh, I don't have that right now, but I can look for that information and
The
give that to
population here
you.
is 2,800,000, close
Okay.
to
Yeah.
300, 3
Okay.
million.
Oh, thank you, Yoji. But even though we are the majority in the city and in the state, we are not the ones that lead the state. We're not in the important political, economic places, right? So we believe that we needed to have spaces. We still need to have spaces and places in Bahia that can put us together, that can make us exchange information, and that can try to build us stronger to face this reality.
Irma, take a minute and discover or share what you're finding in connecting with entrepreneurs and thought leaders in Brazil.
Well, the one store that I know of that Renato spoke of is right across from the Baianas Memorial. So it's right in an amazing spot where living history is being presented to tourists. And I can say that for the group of Black women that I'm with, as soon as they saw the clothes, the books, and the jewelry all in one place, we kind of rushed in and took it over. And it reminds me very much of the Black liberation bookstores from the 60s, where you had examples of Black knowledge, you had examples of Black artistry and craftsmanship, and Black clothing all in one location. And so and we happened to be there when Renato was there. And so the first thing that came to mind was to really ask him the question about the nature of publishing, of being a Black publisher in a country that, as he pointed out, is majority, at least in this state of Bahia, is majority Black, but politically and economically is actually dominated by a white minority. And so I was very interested in that. But I also want to ask Yoji to tell people about what's in the background, because we're broadcasting from an amazing place.
Yoji, go ahead, man.
So we are here. We are at TV Pelourinho that they graciously provide us a room. We are next to each other. Here in the background, we have a mural um, that if you can see here is the picture of Caetano Veloso. He's a songwriter from Bahia, also intellectual, and he's the main patron of TV Pelourinho. He's the person who has been sustaining TV Pelourinho, working with the community since the last government has stopped funding social projects. So, and so we have this beautiful, and we are surrounded by art here in the room. There's several pictures hanging in the wall, and we are in the heart of the historical district. So we're in a very beautiful place.
And drumming is always going on everywhere.
Indeed.
Renato, share with me your personal story. Are you a
Yeah.
native of that community? Talk about how you've come
Yes.
to be where you are in the work and in community.
Yeah. Now, actually, I was born in São Paulo. I was born in the southeast of the country. And since my first visit to Bahia, I understood that there was something between the city, the community in the city, and me that was growing, and that should happen. I didn't know at the beginning what that was going to be, but later, when I decided to move to the city, I came with the idea of a new business here, right? I had the opportunity of traveling a lot in my life before starting this business. And I've seen stores similar to what we do here in other countries, in the United States, in Europe. And I thought to myself, we need something similar here, right? And that's when I started doing it. But now, talking more specifically about the publishing business, which started later, a few years ago, like 7 or 8 years ago, we started a conversation with Dr. Ana Rita Santiago, who is the actual coordinator of the editora Katuka, of the publishing company. And she, back then, she had a research on Black women writers and African women writers. And she was studying, about what they talk, how they were building their histories and their lives. And then we decided to start gatherings here in the store. We have a 3-level building. On the 3rd building, we started having gatherings with those writers and trying to understand how they were working, what they were writing about, and the difficulties and facilities that they were facing on their career. And after doing many of those gatherings, I sent some pictures of some of them. If you could show it now, it would be interesting. It was actually was something very interesting that happened in the city. Lots of people was coming to it. After we had those conversations, we understood that they were studying a lot, they were writing a lot, they were doing their research, but they were not being able to publish their books. Not because there are not publishing companies in the country. There are many big ones. The big ones were not interested in what they were writing about, right? Back then. Now it changed a little bit, but it's still the new ones, they didn't have chances of publishing their books. The other point is they didn't have how to financially support the publishing process because it is a kind of complex and it's a kind of expensive, right? So we understood that we could be a tool on that scenario, that we could join it because there are already other Black publishing companies in the country. Here in Salvador and Bahia, for example, we have Segundo Selo, Organismo, Alguns Toques. We are not the only one. We're not doing anything new, and we are not starting anything. We're just joining this group because we understand that we need to have as many business on this area as we can, because we need let our voices be heard and our stories be known by other people, especially among ourselves, within our community. But everybody has to know a little bit more about us. And then that's when we started.
I'm Al McFarlane. You're listening to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. My guest, the voice you just heard, that of Brother Renato, who is joining us from Bahia, from, I think, Salvador, Bahia, along with our colleague, Dr. Irma McClaurin, and Brother Yoji Senna. A great conversation. I'm going to be joined shortly by another guest who is there. But I want to continue with you, Brother Renato. And so the spirit of self-reliance, the spirit of empowerment in the community, what would you say is the status of that right now? What is the feeling on the ground? Are the people hopeful, committed, resilient, or is there still a sense of oppression that is in undefeatable? I mean, is there a sense that we can't change, that we are fixed in a position of powerlessness?
Okay. Some people are saying that things changed for Black people in Brazil and that now we're doing better than before. I believe that at least now we are facing that the reality of the racism. I mean, we are talking about it. We are being able to show other people, even the people that do not suffer racism, that are out of the Black community, identifying that it is it's a true thing that happens in this country. So at least this is going on. And I think that somehow this is the beginning, okay? Because you can only change something when, first of all, you identify that thing exists, right? We are coming out from a bad, very bad period of government in this country. We had a very bad person on the leading of this country for 4 years now. I hope, but he left an heritage. I mean, he left. We are facing, I think, the whole world, but here in Brazil, we are facing. People are getting in more and more tough regarding. They are trying to save their places, right? It's because racism. The whole thing is about power, and now they understood that we all, most part of us, and that we are moving ourselves toward like getting the space that is our space. We're gonna take it, right? So they are getting even more tough than they used to be before, and it's what happens when you face more and more aggressive. You start getting more and more strong and tough because you need to go against that. We have to survive. It's a fight, right? And because of that, I believe that we Black community, we are starting understanding that we have to have our own business, that we need to make the money somehow circulate about the idea of the Black money, right? Among us, we need to support each other, and that's why when I wanted to say the name of the other publishers in Brazil, for example, I want to say it now. We have Najala, we have in Minas, we have Maza in Minas, we have Malay in Rio, because it's only interesting when we are a group. We are. The idea of business for us Black people, especially here in Brazil, is not that I don't want to be the bigger one. I don't want to be the great one. No, I want to exist. I want to exchange with other business in my area. I want to build us strong together, and that's what we need right now, right? And the white power, they are noticing that, and they are trying to distract us. Unfortunately, some of us are falling on that trap, right? So they are like trying to pull writers to the big publishing companies, offering lots and lots of money and doing lots of stuff. They are regarding the fashion environment. They are invited to work on their companies and make, they are using something that's so important to. It's about our lives, and they are turning that into market only. I'm not against market. I have a business place. I sell stuff. But it doesn't make sense if that doesn't go back to the community, if that doesn't make the community grow and do things like that. So I think there is a change that is starting now. I think that we have to be very careful on to whom we connect, to whom we just like give our information and all our knowledge and everything that we have been bringing so far. I don't know if I answered your question.
That's a great answer. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. Renato Carneiro is the principal, one of the principals at Katuka. I think I'm saying that properly. If I'm not, you'll correct me.
Katuka.
Katuka
Yes.
Africanities. Is that the full name? That the proper name?
Yeah, Katuka Africanities. Yeah.
Okay. And he's joining us with colleagues, Dr. Irma McClaurin and Brother Yoji Senna in Bahia, in Salvador, Bahia, in Brazil. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you for being here. Irma, when we listen to this story, Yoji, we hear this. How does this line up with our assessment of our experience throughout the diaspora? Number one, the principles and the processes of denigration and denial of marginalization or textbook, they're the same. But I think our responses globally have all, from within each culture, demonstrated a resilience and a power. And the next level is a connectivity that technology will provide us that will accelerate our ability to challenge that which seeks to deny us. What do you think, Irma?
Well, I mean, what I'm reminded of when I hear Renato speak is a couple of things. One, in the 1920s and 30s, there was a push for what people called was the Black Belt, which was to take that concentration of Blacks who were concentrated in the South as a consequence of slavery, and to give us that space so that we could actually create a kind of Black area, Black state, if you would. Of course, that didn't happen. And when I hear about Bahia, the difference is that Black Americans are only 12% of the population. You know, Bahia is a state. Salvador is the city in that state, one of many cities, right? And so I'm thinking that they have a concentration and possibility that we may not have had. I think about the Black presses that started in the 1970s, the Broadsides, Dudley Randall out of Detroit, Lotus Press, Magic Long, Naomi Magic Long, who published my first book of poetry. And at that moment in time, there was this myth among white publishers that Black people didn't read, that we weren't interested in buying books. Well, we've proven that wrong time and again. And now we're at a moment in time when, as Renato has pointed out, now that they recognize that there is, in fact, a reading and purchasing public, now white publishers want to come and appropriate. They want to sort of steal away the best Black talent, or who they deem to be the best Black talent. And I think we have to have an obligation and a commitment to continue to support Black presses regardless, so that it's not an either or proposition, but a both and. Because if they don't survive, then we've kind of recreated the colonial state again.
Mm-hmm. Brother Renato, are you familiar with Per Ankh Publishing, with the work of Ike Arma? He's in
No,
Popingain, I think, in Senegal, but they have created a book publishing collective, and they were facing the problems that Irma described, and that is systems that individualized us to our individual and collective disadvantage. And they've decided that rather than always being the supplicant at the altar of white supremacy, of white power, right, of white control, that they would produce for themselves and distribute for themselves and create a standard and a process and a system that was driven by both our capability and our vision of what we wanted to do. So I'm wondering, it sounds like you're doing the same kind of thing. That's what's guided Yoji and I to work on a project that we call Afrodescendientes. And we are a community newspaper in Minnesota, but we're probably the only community newspaper, small paper, that is publishing stories in Yoruba, in Swahili, in Somali, in Portuguese, in Spanish, and in English. And the principle behind that is to recognize that we own these and more idioms, these and more ways to assemble a reality, and that we can use these tools and capacities to shape stories, narratives in which we are the winner. And what we know is that if we're depending on them, they will win and we will lose. That's been the history. The evidence says that their story is about their superiority, and it's a lie. So what do you think? How do we begin to fulfill our mission of change for our own people in a way that requires us to destroy the lie that has bound us, both in philosophy and in practice and in policy over 500 years.
Okay. First of all, I want to say congratulations for the work you've been doing. It's great, right? It's very interesting to know about all of that. I have to say one thing, that all the publishing we've been doing so far has been financially supported by us.
Mm-hmm.
As we understood that the writers would not be able to pay for their books, because we're talking about new writers, people that are starting now their careers, we decided that we would like put part of we would like do the investment, the financial investment. And I have to say one thing, doing a book in Brazil is not cheap, it's expensive. We have to pay lots of taxes and things like that. Like that. For example, to print a book in Bahia, we cannot print it here. We have to print the book in São Paulo or in Rio in the south, because the industry there is bigger. So it's cheaper to do there and then bring the books here. We have no exceptions about paying taxes for on those transactions, right? And but we understood that even selling books is not profitable at all. But we understood that this was our responsibility, that we should do that. If the sale of the book pays for the book, that's okay. We're going to find other ways of raising money to make it happen. We have no governmental support. We have no, no, it's about this business. That's why this business is so important to all of us. It offers jobs and the possibility of changing people's life and transformation on people's life, right? I believe that the only gate for us, the only possibility for us is to understand that if I change my community, automatically my life will be changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way we are working right now. Of course, that for example, the educational system in Brazil, right? Kids, the educational system is bad, okay? The public educational system is bad. It doesn't mean that we don't have good professionals. We have great professionals, great educators. But we black people, the black kids are the ones that do not, some of us go to school, most part of us do not go to school, right? So we're out of this educational program, okay, even the bad one. How are we going to raise readers for those books?
Yeah.
How are we going to change the of the black youth for them to be able to have access to the information that will change their lives?
Mm-hmm.
I have a small business, so by myself, I'll not be able to do anything.
Mm-hmm. And
that's why we always try to work as a group. Those other publisher companies, I've been speaking about them now. We are different companies, but we are always exchanging information. We are always talking. We are always trying to build stuff together. If one of them from Rio, for example, is going to do a release of a book here in Salvador, I'll be responsible for selling the books, taking care of the books, sending him the money, letting this happen here, because he'll not be able to pay for a trip to come and, you know.
Sure.
And that's what we're trying to do. And it's not that I think that somehow we need to be in a certain moment connected to a big company, but we have to be very careful in which basis we're going to be connected to those companies. What are they bringing to us? What are they offering us, and what are us offering them? Mm-hmm. Because when they come to us, it's just like, oh, I'm giving you everything. I mean, okay, see how good it's for you, small black business, come and work with us, and we are offering them everything, right? So I think that we need, even because I think that borders have been created to divide us black people. Borders are not for us, okay? That's why I think it's so important to communicate, is to exchange information,
That's right.
to find even internationally ways of making things happen. Dr. Irma was talking about she would like to have her books translated to Portuguese, for example. Yeah, and we would like to have some of those Brazilian writers, small Brazilian writers, translated to English.
Hmm.
Because
Exactly.
if we do not do that, they will not have access to that possibility of exchange, right? But that maybe we need to do we, uh, uh, accordings with universities, with black professors in universities that can facilitate the translation process for us,
Hmm.
because it's very expensive to pay for a translator to
Mm.
have a book published, right?
Sure,
So
sure,
we
sure.
need find ways. We need to talk and find ways of together build different paths for us in the future. And I believe on that. I'm working on that. We all are, and we're going to make it change for sure.
And Al, I
Renato.
would just add that this
Hmm.
is an amazing vision,
Hmm.
because I think Black writers and Black, those who are interested in a publishing enterprise have been trying to move in this direction, for a long time. And given the number of people of African descent in Brazil, it seems like, how do we find ways to connect? So as he says, it's an exchange that Black writers, and I believe, Renato, you have actually published Black writers like Carlos Moore and have them translated. Whether we go about trying to find grants, this is kind of the institute that Al wanted to set up, but to find ways to make that possible so that we can get this flow of cultural information and knowledge. And I just wanted to just highlight one more thing, that some of the books, as Renato talked about, how do you build a reading public, is that they're also publishing children's books, so that
Yep.
they're also, as a publisher, wanting to cultivate the audience very young, because literacy is crucial.
Let me shift
Completely
the
right.
conversation. Brother Renato, thank you so much. I know you got to leave. Hang out as long as you
Thank you.
can.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your voice and
Showing
for
the
your work.
books.
Please, yeah, yeah. Here,
Showing the
read the
books.
title.
Uh,
Yeah, read the
yeah.
no. Show them again. Show the
Oh,
titles. Let's put them up again.
oh, there are more. There are more.
Yeah, let's put them up.
Okay. Can you see? Okay.
Yeah,
I want to just say a quick thing. Sorry, I don't want to
yeah.
take much of your time, but
Go ahead. Go ahead.
as responsible for the art direction of the books, we're doing a connection between young Black artists in the city and those texts, right? So, because we publish African writers as well, we try to connect those artists. So we invite young artists here to do arts that will be on the cover of the books,
Hmm.
and we've been doing very interesting stuff. Okay,
Those
I
are
wanna,
beautiful.
yes, I wanna thank you all for inviting me. I think that this conversation could take like hours because
Uh,
there's a lot to be talking about it.
sure.
But I understand that future in the future we're gonna keep this
Yeah.
conversation, and we're gonna find ways of changing this reality. Thank you for having me here. Thank you,
Thank you for
Dr.
being here.
Irma,
Thank you
for
so
inviting
much.
me. Thank you.
I'm
Thank
Al
you. Bye
McFarlane.
bye.
This is the conversation with Al McFarlane. What a wonderful conversation, and what a great work that brother Renato is doing in Salvador, Bahia. We want to bring a next guest in, and I'm going to ask Brother Yoji to introduce our next guest. Special guest, special story. Yoji, I'm handing the microphone to you to bring our next guest
Okay.
in.
Well, our next guest is DJ Ahmar Mansour. I met him as I moved when I moved back here. He's an acquaintance of my son in the capoeira world from California, and one of the things I found very curious of him is that his father was Bob Marley's security. So this connection to one of my idols of my adolescence and young years, a person who influenced how I think and act today. and he's a accomplished DJ here in the city, a leader of this community of African American expatriates that is here in Salvador, and a person as an African American who living here for 15 years. He has a special eye about our reality, and as well having the both feet, one feet in America and another here. So he kind of can understand both worlds and perhaps be able to point ways that how we can join, to achieve this idea, of Pan-Africanism. So this is DJ Ahmar Mansour.
Greetings, how you doing?
Great.
You're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. How you doing, brother Amar?
I'm doing well. Thank you guys. Thank you for the invite. I definitely appreciate it. Yoji Senna, thank you for calling me to this. It's been a while since I've talked to anybody outside of my small circles here, so it's kind of great. Yeah, I definitely appreciate it. I actually, your name sounds really familiar. Actually, now that I'm seeing it. So I appreciate being on the show.
Okay, cool. Well, tell about yourself. I mean, I'm curious that you you are an expat. They call the word, I think, right? Have
Yes.
moved to Brazil. Talk about that process. How is it that you chosen to locate and to be at home in Brazil now? And what's it feel like? And I'm asking from, yeah.
I'll start with the feeling first. I'll start with the
Go
feeling.
ahead.
It's great.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it here. I don't regret it a day. I don't regret a day, here. I go through, to normal life, having to pay rent, bills, all that stuff. It's just normal. But living here for me has just, I feel extremely at home. I was introduced to Brazil because of capoeira. I actually started training capoeira in high school. I was, I grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, and I was involved in some gangs and street activity for normal kids. But I was always active in school, so I was playing basketball. I was in the fashion shows. I was B+ student, and I was a good guy, basically. But street life kind of got, started to cross roads with my academic life, and as an alternative to being expelled from school, I was introduced to capoeira with an ultimatum that said, "Hey, you either gonna do capoeira in your spare time when you're not in class or you're not in, basketball practice or eating lunch, or you can, find your life on the street, and we wish you luck." And since my father was security for Bob Marley, one of my senseis was the late George Cofield, and my entire family is involved in martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of knew that if I ever got kicked out of school, I was probably going to get my butt kicked. It was going to be far worse than anything I could ever imagine. I'd rather end up going to jail. So I decided to to try the capoeira. And it worked wonders. Me having a dancer's background and also having the martial arts background since I was a kid, it made it really easy to adapt and assimilate the movements in capoeira to the point where I got really good. I ended up, it ended up doing its job. I ended up graduating in the top 5% of my class, and from high school. I continued training capoeira, which I train to this day. It's been 26 years. And then 2 years later, I get invited to represent the United States in a capoeira tournament here in Brazil, but in Rio. I was 18 at the time, and I actually used the money that I got from selling stuff on the streets to pay for my ticket. And then I came to Brazil, and when I got here, my mind was just blown. One, the amount of African descendants that I saw, because everything that I had seen about Brazil up until that moment was, blonde hair, blue eyed, samba, carnival, et cetera, et cetera. So when I got here and I actually saw the face of the people, I was in shock and I was amazed and in love with the culture. You know, the vibrancy, all the colors, the music, the food. I love food, so it was just like it was just amazing. And then you know the energy from capoeira, you know the brotherhood, the new family, the being able to be exposed to new people, all of that kind of created this energy, just I would say energetic field for me. And then when I finally was able to get to Brazil, when I finally touched down like in Rio, when I got my both feet on the ground, I felt the proverbial chip on my shoulder be lifted. I literally felt physically lighter. And I was like, yeah, this is home. So once that happened, I was like, I'm going to live here. I don't know how it's going to happen, but that's just what's going to happen. And you know, since then, I had gone back and forth to the States until one time my mother was like, hey, every time you have some money, you go to Brazil. Why don't you just go there and live? And I was like, you know what? That's exactly what I'm going to do. So I've actually been living here since 2009, but I've been coming to Brazil since 1999.
Wow.
That's a wonderful story, man. Go ahead, Irma.
Yes, I was just going to ask if you could talk a bit about who are the kinds of people, you know, they're expatriates, and so they're white expatriates and black expatriates. Could you talk a bit about what the black expatriate community is like? Who are the kinds of people who've come here? And if you have a sense of how large it is, at least in Salvador.
I actually don't deal with many white expatriates.
So I'm asking about the black ones. I'm asking about the black ones, not the white ones.
I only know two. I only know two. So they're there.
Okay.
The black expats. It's a very small community. I wouldn't say our numbers here go over the 50s. You know, if it's 50, I would say that's a lot. And not all of us have a very collective mind state. You know, we don't get together for meetings or anything. As much as I would like to, as much as I've tried to get them together, most of them just don't come out and support each other. But there is a small group that does, and you know, most of them are brothers. There's a couple of sisters that are involved as well, and I guess it could be my own personal energy. But all of the expats that I interact with are all pro-black, forward-thinking individuals. So we're all trying to, you know, sit down and figure out how we can collectively make not only our lives better here, but also, you know, the lives of the diaspora or the Afro-Brazilians here in the community, and you know, thinking about how we can expand that into a global Pan-African commerce.
Now, do you speak Portuguese, and how critical is it to you navigating this space? Most of us have exposure to Spanish, and ironically, since you know, Brazil has the largest number of people of African descent outside of the continent of Africa. You know, it's not a language that we're often exposed to. So how have you managed to navigate the culture, linguistics?
Funny enough, I speak fluent Portuguese, but I've never taken a Portuguese class in my life. I'm 100% fluent. I've gotten better over the years, of course, because I continue to try to make it work. I try to read books. I try to read newspaper. Watch a lot of movies. I watch TV in Portuguese, and I now dream in Portuguese sometimes. But I am completely fluent.
They say that when you dream, count, and curse in a language when you learn that language.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. I dream in Spanish, right? And for that reason, I feel like I'm always learning and comparing things in Spanish. As my challenge is vocabulary, just words I don't know. But the more I think about it and I construct, what I'm doing and the world through the Spanish that I know. So it's a wonderful thing. I loved your story, particularly the story of coming to the country and seeing people like you throughout the country, and reminded me of my first trip to San Juan, Puerto Rico, right? And I was in the Navy. Ship pulled into San Juan, and my picture of San Juan was pretty much, white, light skin. That's what I thought. And I get there and I say, look, all these cats look just like me, you know? So I take the uniform off, go sit on the corner, and I'm just like everybody else. Same thing when I went to my own uh, country, Jamaica, for the first time. I discovered that when I'm at a bus stop in Kingston, and if I don't act nervous, I'm 19, 18 years old, don't act scared, number one, and keep your mouth shut. Relax, right? And once you relax, you flow in with the feeling of the community and you become one. And that's an awakening. And I think you were describing that as well. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, exactly. I remember when I first got to Brazil, I remember taking a picture of this guy walking down the street and sending it to my uncle. He was like, I got a twin. This guy looked exactly like my uncle. I was like, oh, this is crazy. I can't believe it. I took a picture of the guy. The guy kind of looked at me and I was like, it's because my uncle looks just like you. And I sent it to him. He was like, I showed him the picture of my uncle. He was like, wow. Yeah. So, that was one of
the doppelgangers.
Feel so much more comfortable. Yeah.
And Yoji,
What would you
go ahead,
what would you say to Black Americans in terms of what would you say to Black Americans in terms of visiting Brazil? Whether you think that it's something that it would be easy for people to navigate, because I think, as you described, the power and the beauty of seeing the influence, the perpetuation and continuation of Africanisms and African culture, as part of everyday life. Like I said, we sort of had to close the doors because drumming is happening all the time. It's not just something that happens on a holiday, but it happens all the time. And of course, you see the Baianas who are selling on the streets, and they are dressed in, the clothing of their ancestors. And so it's like everyday life is so rich and filled with this notion of Africanisms. What would you say to Black Americans in terms of visiting the country?
I would say don't let the false narratives and false comforts of the United States lead you into a space of fear where you're not able to venture out past the country's borders. Understand that the Afro-descendant population, the diaspora, is, if not the largest, it's the second largest population on the planet. So wherever you go, you're most likely going to run into more people that look like you, which is going to make you feel more comfortable than you're going to run into, Europeans that will make you feel less comfortable. Don't be scared to learn a new language, and also don't be scared to not be able to communicate. Have confidence in your nonverbal communication.
I was going to ask you, brother, what other fields of martial arts your family was in? You said your folks were all martial artists. What else?
Yes.
What all were you guys doing?
I was raised. My first style that I trained was George Cofield, which is Shotokan Karate. And then I trained with Ring Worlds Collide with Tanuka's Root Jiu-Jitsu under the late Master Moses Powell, Sensei Ahmad, and Professor X, who was also Louis Farrakhan's bodyguard. And then from there, I kind of ventured on. I've done Taekwondo, I've done Hungar, Kung Fu, Ninjutsu, Hapkido, Krav Maga. And now I do Kyokushin Karate, and I am an instructor in capoeira. I've been doing capoeira for about 26 years now.
What's the common thread in your search for knowledge through the study of martial arts? What's the intent? What motivates you, and why do you stay with it? What do you seek to attain?
Well, my dad was a student of Malcolm X, and I was raised in the Nation of Islam. I actually was raised in Muhammad Mosque number 7. Actually, as a 14-year-old, I was teaching martial arts in Muhammad Mosque number 7.
In New York,
as a
in New York,
12-year-old
right?
in New York, yes, in Harlem, yeah.
Yeah.
At 12, I was teaching 9-year-olds karate in the Jackie Robinson Center for Physical Education, and I am a strong, firm believer in self-defense. Mm-hmm. And I train. I've never done a tournament in my life. I'm actually going to do my first tournament on the 17th here in Bahia. But I've always trained to protect myself, my family, and my people. And I push that to everybody. Like, everybody needs to learn self-defense. Everybody needs to learn how to defend yourself. Everybody needs to learn how to defend your family and your community. Because, our oppressors are cowards. Once they realize that you will defend yourself and by any means necessary, they're going to take a step back.
Mm-hmm. Did you guys see the social media here last week, 2 weeks ago, about Montgomery, Alabama? Did that get on your social media?
Oh, yeah.
Down there as well?
Yes. That have huge repercussions out here.
I think that has cultural healing implications, because I think we, meaning African people, saw that differently from what the white press was trying to see and say, or trying to ignore. And our people in social media and news around the globe, I'm thinking, jump on this as a teachable moment, and recasting this idea that white people had, that they could come and do whatever they wanted to just because they're white. And this is what they got. The difference is we were able to capture it, record it, and share it. And I think we've always done that all the time, but they controlled the information system, and the reality of our resistance was never reported out. It was suppressed.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think. What do you think? Tell me about when you watched that video. What did you think?
And I was filled with so much pride, actually. I was like, yeah, finally somebody's doing what they're supposed to do. Put down the cameras and go defend your brothers and sisters. That's the way it's supposed to be. There's no way that any one white person should feel like they could put their hands on a black person with other black people standing around at all, ever. They can argue all they want. They can yell all they want, but they should never have the courage to put their hands on another black person, especially a black female. Taking that out because it was a brother that they attacked first, but they should never feel that they can attack any black person if there were other black people around. One person hold the camera and everybody else jump in. So there's a recording, so you can say this is what happened, and that's why he got his butt kicked. And then
Yoji,
consequences.
Yoji, what did you think, Yoji, when you saw this? You were applauding there for a second. What do you think?
Man, I was jumping up and down.
Yeah.
So
as a martial artist, I was like, none of them have any actual training, because if they did, the fight would have lasted about 2 minutes.
Here's the deal. I was telling my wife that one of our friends who used to live here in Twin Cities was the nephew of Robert Mugabe. Tony Mtero was his name. You might have known Tony Mtero, Yoji. He was back here in town for a few years.
Yeah.
But anyway, he told me that when his uncle came to power in Zimbabwe, he went with public announcements, promoted announcements to the country, to the people of Zimbabwe. If a white man disrespects you, beat him and arrest him. Do not accept anybody white feeling they have the privilege and the authority to disrespect or brutalize or hurt you. And if one dares, you have the responsibility of stopping that aggression and rendering that person less of a danger to yourself and to community, and in fact, operating with the sense of the law, right, in bringing this person to justice. That's a whole different attitude. And that's kind of where we got to go, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think, Dr. Irma?
Well, I think there has been so much about the actions after George Floyd and the young man who was killed in his own apartment by the policewoman. When her trial came up, there was hugging and forgiveness, and I think people are simply tired of this. Is that with that amount of aggression that is unapologetic, that is without remorse. They white splain everything. So they want to say, well, I didn't know, I didn't mean to, but it's not with remorse, and it's not with the real sense that they have any kind of sorrow for what they've done. And the public, the media, is sort of portraying it, well, of course she would be afraid. And of course, even though it wasn't her apartment, even though she was in the wrong, why do we keep having to turn the other cheek? And I think I am always reminded of the words of Frederick Douglass, who says you can't have a storm without wind and rain. And I think we are in a moment of storm. And I think that as we're looking at these laws that are being passed with an attempt to erase us, to erase our history, to contain us, to put us backwards, to put us into a box where we feel like we have no choice and option, people forget as too much has transpired for us to go. I tell people, you cannot put the black genie back into the bottle. We just won't go. And so I think we're at this moment in time that this incident is reflective of people just having white fragility fatigue. We are just tired, of this idea that somehow we must continuously forgive white people for all their transgressions.
Well, I'm going to leave it there. That's a mic drop, I think. Dr. Irma, thank you so much. Brother Ahmad, thank you for being here. Congratulations on your successful career. Take a minute. Guerreiros da Luz. Talk about that. I got about a minute. Let's get people,
Okay.
and if you're looking for support, let's make the ask.
Yes, absolutely looking for support. So Guerreiros da Luz is the result of my childhood working with the Jackie Robinson Center for Physical Education and the Nubian Algonquin Cultural Arts Center, which was created by my dad, and Leadership 2000, which was also created by my father. When I came out to Brazil the first time, it was 1998, 1999. Brazil was still going through its huge homeless crisis, where a large part of that population were homeless children. And during that time, I was introduced or came across several homeless children. One was a little boy who at 12 o'clock at night, he was out there playing capoeira. And when I asked him why hadn't he gone home yet, he said he didn't have one. The other was a 12-year-old girl who tried to prostitute herself to me while I was in the street. I ended up giving her a place to stay, at least for that night. And then after that, I ran into several other children. So that touched me deep enough so that when I went back to the States after that first time, I came back, I gave away everything I had, took all the money that I had, and I actually had met a guy who, after having written Guerreiros da Luz down and what I wanted to do, he actually paid for my ticket. So I gave away basically everything I had in the United States and came back to Brazil to work with these homeless kids that I had met. And I was working
out
in
of
a place
time,
called.
but take a minute and just tell people how they can reach you. How can they connect and support? How can they learn more about the project, and how can they support it?
Okay, if you want to reach me, I'll give you my email address. It's GDLACE, that's peace, GDL for Guerreiros da Luz, peace @gmail.com. That's also the PayPal if you want to contribute. But please send me an email if you have any questions or if you want to come volunteer. GDLpeace@gmail.com.
Thank you so much. Listen, Dr. Irma, Brother Yoji, as always, a great conversation. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.